if you want to talk about where I am extremely libertarian, it is when it comes to our constitutional rights. I believe in the separation of church and state, full stop. I don't give a rat's ass what you believe. This is not a Christian nation. It may be a Christian majority nation, but there is a separation of the church from the state. It's written in our most important document. Now, of course, somebody like Mike Huckabee doesn't believe that. And putting him in a position of power, even if it is the ambassador to Israel, it's still a pretty significant position. So as we know, he met with a treasonous criminal. There is really no other way to describe this other than the fact that you now have this man who decided to go to Tel Aviv and meet with this person who was a spy against the United States. But I want to set this up where people can understand the psychotic mindset of Mike Huckabee.
I ask all the time, because I'm a Christian, and they say, well, why are you so supportive of the Jewish people? I said, you can be Jewish, you don't have to have anything to do with Christians, but you can't be a Christian and not understand that your entire faith is built on the foundation of Judaism. So for Christians, we look at this as an obligation, a moral debt that we must repay. And therefore, I don't understand anyone who says, I'm a Christian, but I don't really want to support the Jews. Well,
but yet you understand Christians that have a problem with Muslims, and yet Muslims are the next incarnation of that, in that they respect and incorporate the Jewish Bible and the Christian Bible. Like Jesus is mentioned more in the Quran than Muhammad. So it's just ridiculous how ignorant this person is. And and how brainwashed. I think he legitimately believes in the mythology.
I think he is a true believer, like Pence was. I think that there probably is some truth to that. But that also lends to the notion that anyone who is a true believer does not belong in government. I don't mind if you're religious, but there's something entirely different when you believe that your religion supersedes our laws and our traditions. And that is something that Mike Huckabee believes.
Well, he thinks it's allowed to, he thinks that religion should be allowed to dictate geopolitics in general. And that's absurd. That's like your little mythical book is not law, right? Like it's so absurd that we're dealing with grown-ups in a grown-up world that believe in such fairy tales and want to govern the world accordingly. It's so absurd.
Well, that's the whole point. This is exactly why I believe in the separation of church and state. And I'm not an atheist. I'm not. But I also know that you can't force your beliefs on other people. We had the Crusades, and you lost. Yeah. That's why they hate Muslims as much as they do. Because the Muslims won the Crusades. You know, that's a little inconvenient truth of history that they like to forget or don't like to talk about. So, with that said, he has a little.
They don't even know their own religion well. And guys, we're working on getting John Fugelsang back on. He's been a guest on before, but he has a new book out called Separation of Church and Hate. And he is someone that would be so perfect to address the lunacy of these supposed quote unquote Christians, because there's nothing Christ-like about these people.
No.
How can you do that? But it is not the view of those of us who are what I would call biblical believers that accept that what the scripture says about the Jewish people. In Genesis 12, those who bless Israel will be blessed. Those who curse Israel will be cursed. It gets pretty simple. When I say there's a miracle.
That is a fucking lie, and I am getting so sick and tired of these people misconstruing what the Holy Bible actually says. And make no mistake, the Bible that Huckabee is quoting is a blasphemous reinterpretation of the scripture called the Schofield Bible. And what was the purpose of the Schofield Bible? It was the Zionist Bible that was written at the turn of the 20th century. You know, the amazing thing about religion is that you would think the more they modernize themselves, you know, kind of like the Protestants and then the Calvinists and then ultimately the Mormons, and then we get to the Scientologists. You know what they all have in common? The more modern they get, the more insane they get. You would think that there would be some semblance of, oh, maybe we should be a little bit more modern in our views about what took place 2,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. No, let's get more insane. That's what they're doing. And Huckabee is a prime example of that.
Yeah. I mean, but that's why it's important for us to talk to people that are truly people that have like what we call Christ consciousness, right? People that are true Christians that live that way and practice their life in that way. These people are not that. These are capitalists. These are capitalist Zionists. It's a very different kind of thing. And it's interesting because even Tucker Carlson gets this. Even Tucker Carlson gets that what Huckabee is talking about, the Bible he's quoting, all of that rhetoric is complete bullshit and has absolutely nothing to do with being a Christian or believing in teachings of Christ, right? So, you know, and it never ceases to amaze me that it often takes an atheist to explain what the Christ-like consciousness is. Because atheists do it without having fear of getting in trouble. They just do it because we just do it.
Yes, I agree. And why do we bring this up? Why is this so significant? Here's why. American who spied for Israel says he met Ambassador Mike Huckabee to thank him for his support. Jonathan Pollard, an ex-U.S. intelligence analyst, spent 30 years in prison on espionage charges after being found to have passed documents to Israel. And of course, he looks like this.
Well, that's irrelevant. And how, when was this happened? 30 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not familiar with his like particular case. I know who he is and like that he was released, but I don't really know the background of, you know, his conviction.
Convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard downplayed the controversy around his private meeting with U.S. Ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee. Just the fact that of all the people you are going to Tel Aviv to meet with, you're meeting with a person who is a convicted, treasonous bastard, a person who truly was working against the interests of this country. You, by proxy, Mike Huckabee, are a traitor to the United States, because I have no doubt that whatever you were meeting Mr. Pollard about was not to have tea and crumpets. No chance. It was much more sinister than that. Which is why when Mr. Pollard was released, who was the person who greeted him at the tarmac when he arrived back in Tel Aviv? Who, Jen? Who do you think would have been the first person to meet him on the tarmac when he arrived? I can't hear you.
Milikowski.
Correct. Netanyahu Milikowski.
Netanyahu.
The main point of the meeting at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, excuse me, was to thank the ambassador for his efforts on my behalf during my incarceration. So what you're saying is that Huckabee went to great lengths to get you out of prison.
Right. Well, this is another great example. This is the other side of when I'm always saying one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. So this man is a hero to Huckabee. So it's one man's traitor is another man's hero.
Pollard, a former American intelligence analyst, spent 30 years in prison on espionage charges after being found to have passed critical security documents to Israeli intelligence in the 1980s. Israel made Pollard a citizen during his lengthy prison term. And he moved there in 2020, 5 years after his release on probation. During Pollard's detention, Huckabee was among several pro-Israeli politicians who advocated for his release. arguing that the sentence was too severe for someone who had been spying for an ally. He should have been hung. He should have been hung in the gallows. That's what should have happened.
Hanged, but yes.
He didn't hang, but should have hung.
Hanged.
Hung.
No.
Pollard described his meeting as more of a social call and insisted the two didn't discuss politics or Gaza. Scout's honor, I swear to you.
Right. Huckabee has just basically told us it's like his primary mission in life is to abide by what he believes the Bible requires him to do. And that is fulfill the prophecy of Judea and Samaria. I mean, like, that's his whole his whole thing. That's why he's in this job. But yet that's not what they spoke about.
Well, this is the whole point about corporate money in politics. When Miriam Adelson gives the Donald $100 million, among other high-profile Zionazi billionaires, you all have to understand, if you don't already, that that comes with conditions. And one of those conditions was putting Mike Huckabee in a position of authority.
Absolutely.
Excuse me. But the meeting comes amid a growing list of episodes in which the ambassador, a fierce champion of Israel, has appeared to deviate from official White House policy as the Trump administration deepens its involvement in Middle East diplomacy and peacekeeping. The New York Times first revealed the meeting Thursday. In a statement, spokesperson for the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem said the article is filled with inaccuracies and said Huckabee has meetings each day with numerous people. And as a matter of general policy, we don't comment as to the content of conversations. If it was so important that these two communicated, or that he was a friend and wanted to send him good wishes, they could have just done a phone call, couldn't they? But no.
Well, it's just absurd to think that that's the case. This is just silly. This is silly.
The embassy offered no further information and declined to comment from the ambassador himself. The White House was not aware of that meeting, but the president stands by our ambassador. Of course he does. Pollard said the meeting was a simple story that got far more complicated than it deserved. Isn't that always the case? Just like it's a little bit of genocide, not that much. Hey, we didn't kill 600,000 Palestinians. We only killed 137,000. So you can't be mad at us. That's how they treat it.
It doesn't matter. Honestly, I'm amazed that people take this. But again, this is NBC News, so can only expect so much.
He told NBC News that he had arranged the visit simply by phoning up the ambassador's office. Oh, is that all it took? Oh, that's pretty simple. He has nothing to hide, and I had nothing to hide. Bullshit. Adding that it was an intense personal visit to thank him for his work while he was incarcerated. I can't believe I'm reading this.
You could have just sent a fruit basket.
Yeah. Sent him an apple pie for Thanksgiving. Why do you have to meet him? What is so significant? Again, there is no doubt in my mind that they're meeting because he's passing trade secrets.
Well, right. So we're supposed to believe that somebody who spent 30 years incarcerated for being a spy isn't still a spy? That makes no sense whatsoever. That's so silly.
Yeah. If you're in the CIA, you're a spy. Once in the CIA, always in the CIA.
Always.
And once a spy, always a spy. Period.
Always compromised, never trustworthy.
When you get to that level of clandestine operations, it never goes away. It's what you were put on this earth to do, apparently. And so, but there were questions across the political spectrum for Huckabee over his decision to meet the notorious spy whose long imprisonment drove a wedge between the U.S. and Israel. Oh, some wedge they drove, let me tell you. Representative Joaquin Castro, who somebody on this podcast knows pretty well.
I wouldn't say I know him pretty well. I knew him as a clerk at Aiken Gump when I was in Texas.
Would Congressman Castro remember you if he saw you?
I don't know. He would probably recognize the name, my maiden name, just from when we were law clerks. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, he remembers you on social media. That in much counts, I suppose.
Well, he also now remembers me as somebody who ran against Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
And I'm sure he would privately say, thank you very much.
Maybe. I always got along well with Castro brothers. They're nice guys. I never had a,
Representative Castro on X said that Huckabee should not have met with the convicted traitor, while former Fox News host Tucker Carlson said Huckabee's conduct was shocking behavior from a U.S. ambassador.
But is it really?
Is it really shocking?
Is it really shocking behavior from a U.S. ambassador when we have a president who just on television admitted that he doesn't care about due process regarding all the boats they're blowing up and Venezuela and the fishermen, and literally said, no, we're just going to kill him. We're just going to kill him. So why is anything surprising to anyone anymore? Like, this is it. We are in the Wild West, folks. Nothing is surprising anymore.
But this isn't the first time that Huckabee, a two-time presidential candidate, former governor of Arkansas. Keep in mind, Huckabee did win the Iowa caucus back in 2008. And self-described Christian Zionist, that's blasphemy, has ruffled feathers on policy, of course. The ambassador told Israeli media in early September that the U.S. would not stop Israel from annexing the occupied West Bank. The White House and several senior administration officials have since made it clear that the U.S. would oppose such a move. Earlier this year, he told Bloomberg that the U.S. was no longer pursuing the goal of Palestinian statehood, not like they ever were, which has long stood as a central feature of American diplomacy in the Middle East. A U.S.-backed plan for Gaza approved by the UN earlier this month reinstated support for a future credible pathway to Palestinian self-determination statehood. We'll be talking about that at the top of the hour, guests. Huckabee has regularly used the religiously loaded term Judea and Samaria to refer to the West Bank, the most Palestinian enclave that Israel has occupied since 1967. In 2008, he said that there is no such thing as a Palestinian. Of course he did. And that Palestinian nationhood is just a political tool to try and force land away from Israel. Man, he's really a dangerous fuck. Like, he really is. Bad guy.
Huckabee?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's the evangelical Christian on the inside. He's the evangelical Christian that is the liaison to the Zio state. So yeah, he's a problem.
In an interview with NBC News on Sunday before news of the Pollard meeting broke, he downplayed talk of a rift with the White House and struck a decidedly more obedient tone. I don't get to make the policy. I simply carry it out as the ambassador. Now, what Mr. Huckabee is not telling you is that the policy that he is following is not the policy of the President of the United States. He's following the policy of the Zio state. That's what he's following.
But wouldn't that also be the policy of the president, because the president is completely compromised by the Zio state? So really, I would suggest that their mission is one and the same. He's with the Zio state. He just personally doesn't really give that much of a shit because he just doesn't care about anything but himself because he's a complete toxic narcissist. But he's with the Zio state. And I also think he gets really shitty intel. So he's acting based on what he hears. And I think he definitely is in an information silo that is probably pretty inaccurate.